So welcome back to the Lift Your Life podcast, and I am joined once again by an amazing guest today, and it is another repeat guest. And like last week's guest, this guest was someone who was one of my first ever guests on the podcast nearly 2 years ago, which is absolutely crazy. I recorded one of my first ever episodes with Danni in the first lockdown, and 2 years have passed, and quite a lot's happened, I think, with the world in 2 years, but a lot's happened with Danni over 2 years, which has been really, really incredible to watch. And that's why I wanted to get her on the podcast, because her story and what she's putting out there at the moment is absolutely incredible. And I think more people need to hear about it. So Danni, I'm not going to make you do the whole introduce yourself and your life story, because people need to go back to the first podcast if they want to listen to that. But quite a bit's changed in terms of yourself from when you were last on the podcast, in terms of the kind of people that you work with and what you kind of do. So just give people a bit of an update as to what it is that you now do from your business perspective, in terms of your coaching business and your sort of other endeavors that you've got going on at the moment.
Yeah, so I think when I last came on the podcast, I was still coaching competitors.
Yeah.
So essentially, it was nearly a year ago now, maybe just under a year, I decided that I was no longer going to take people through contest prep anymore. And that decision wasn't just like an overnight decision. It was something that I thought about for a long time, and something, it was a very educated decision. It wasn't just like one day I woke up and was like, oh, I'm not going to coach competitors anymore. It was definitely accumulated over time. And for those of you who don't know, I stopped competing myself in 2020. So 2020 was my last competitive season. And my personal life has changed a lot since then. So at the time, obviously, when you compete in bodybuilding, you have to dedicate everything to it. Your entire life becomes bodybuilding when you're trying to be the best athlete you possibly can do. And so you could say that now my life is a lot more balanced. I have much more of a social life. I invest much more time, energy, effort into my friendships, my relationships with family members. And I commit a lot more time to things outside of just training nutrition. I have a lot more time, energy, effort for business, for my clients, for being the best coach that I possibly can be. And I'm a much healthier individual all round as well, both mentally and physically. So I made that change personally, stopped competing in 2020, started living a much more balanced life, and my value of health became much stronger. And for those of you who do compete or know what bodybuilding consists of, you'll know that when you do compete, there's no two ways around the fact that you are going to sacrifice your health to some extent. And so pushing people through that process of contest prep started to make me feel quite conflicted, because I really valued health, and I really valued the health of my clients, and I really care a lot about the people that I work with. So then pushing them through a process that was going to have a negative effect on their health, and it was unavoidable that was really hard. And I really started to struggle with that. And so I got to the point where I knew that I could no longer push people through that process whilst being healthy and happy personally, because it was just so against what I wanted to put out into the world, and it was so against my values. And I started to feel very conflicted pushing people through that. And so I decided to stop taking people through contest prep as of last year. And last year was the last season that I took people through prep, and I still coach people that have competed in the past. I love doing that and helping them regain their health, helping them move into life after bodybuilding. But I don't take people through the process of contest prep anymore.
Yeah. Amazing. So I kind of want to just bridge that gap then for the listeners so you must have been on prep then when 2020 was your last show. So were you prepping during lockdown?
Yes, I was.
Yeah, fun times. So that's where we must have been at last time. So when you were doing that last prep then, were there any sort of thoughts going through your head that were kind of, I'm not really enjoying this anymore? So And how did things then end with that prep, which then led into actually, this is not aligning with me? How did that transition happen from you doing that final prep into that decision of actually, you know what, this is no longer for me anymore?
Yeah. So first of all, that prep was a very long prep. So I started the prep in, I think it was January or February. And my last show ended up being at the start of October. So I was literally dieting all year. Like, that prep wasn't supposed to be that long. And I think I started to realize that that prep was going to be my last prep, probably about, I'd say, just over halfway through it. And if I think about it, at that point, I would have really, if it wasn't for Corona, I would have stopped my prep at that point, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because the time when I realized that it was no longer for me was when I would have actually finished my prep if it wasn't for the world turning upside down, basically. So yeah, I sort of started to realize halfway through that prep that was going to be my last season. But you'll know what it's like when you're competing and you're laser focused on a goal. Like, I'd worked so hard towards that goal for so long, and was so fixed on that goal. Like, there was no way that I was going to stop partway through that prep or not step on stage when I'd worked so hard for it for so long. And so I was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to continue with this prep. We'll see how it goes, see how I feel when I step off stage. But I had a feeling that it was going to be my last prep. And it got to a point where towards the end of that prep, I just started to realize that it was taking more from me than it was offering me. If I asked myself in that moment, why are you competing? What is it offering you? Like, what is it adding to your life? I wouldn't have been able to answer that question. It was taking more from me in a negative way, such as the sacrifices to health, the time, the energy, the effort that I could have been investing into work, into my friendships, into my relationships, into being healthy. It was taking all of that, but it wasn't really offering me much more anymore. I just didn't have that same love for pushing myself through that process and that same love for stepping on stage. I started to not feel quite as excited for my shows. And the moment for me that anything starts to take more from you than it offers you is the moment you should stop pursuing that thing. Because, like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. Life is to be lived, and there's no point in wasting your life pursuing something that's taking more from you than it's actually offering you, in my opinion. And so that's why I sort of realized that was going to be my last prep. And the reason I followed through was a lot went on for me personally that year, and I needed that focus, I needed that goal. And so I did ultimately use it as a bit of a coping mechanism. And that's something that I think a lot of competitors end up doing. They end up bodybuilding, competing as a bit of a coping mechanism, as a bit of a mask when they've got other shit going on that they need to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with that 100%. So when you came off the back of that, then did you have a bit of a plan of action as to what the next steps were going to be? Because as you said, bodybuilding is very, very, very life consuming, especially on prep, when you are literally every single thing in your day is centered around what you need to do with food and steps and cardio. So did you kind of have an idea at that point of, because you were saying that, it's taking away from these things, of how you were actually going to fill that time? Because going from, especially an extreme of prep, to then obviously just going, I'm not doing this anymore, that's quite a big jump. So did you kind of just transition? Did you start reversed in a typical way that you would out of a show, or was it quite atypical because you knew that it wasn't going to serve you anymore, so you did a different kind of style of approach, if that makes sense?
So with training's something that I've always absolutely loved and has always been a constant for me. So it's never like, I've never come out of a contest prep and been like, I just don't want to train. Like, I've always loved training. So that remained a constant, and my training frequency pretty much stayed the same. I still trained with intensity, just tried different styles, and I stayed really active and obviously dropped down my cardio. But from a nutrition perspective, I think I carried on tracking for maybe 3 weeks, and then I just stopped tracking altogether. But this is something that I've done previously. It's not the first time I've done that. So in my improvement seasons, whilst I was bodybuilding, I always took time away from tracking, and I always followed quite a flexible approach to nutrition. And what that did is it enabled me to maintain as good of a relationship with food as possible whilst competing. And so when I did decide to then come away from it, I'd had experience not tracking previously. I already followed quite a flexible approach to nutrition. And so it made that transition easier. So if, for example, I had a client who had just stepped on stage and they said to me, I don't want to compete any longer, with that client, I would probably have them, I'd get them straight back up to maintenance, but have them still track, and they would have a lot more structure. But because I had been through that previously and I'd taken time away from tracking previously, and I was comfortable with it, I was fine just taking that approach. But with someone who feels a bit more, there's people that might feel quite uneasy making that jump and just deciding not to track all of a sudden, but I felt quite comfortable with it, bearing in mind as well that I'd been tracking since I think 2014 and my last season was 2020, so like my knowledge on nutrition is very good. I could pretty much track a meal by just looking at it, so it's not like I was just eating Pop-Tarts and shits all day when I decided not to track. I was very much eating very similar meals, but just obviously in larger quantities, and my relationship with food was in a good place, so I wasn't like binging, or I didn't feel the need to eat food in excess to an extreme like extent like some people might do if they took that approach.
Yeah, totally get that. So what else did you do then? Because obviously with bodybuilding, it is very, very sort of time consuming and mind consuming. Did you find that there was a bit of a, almost like a withdrawal effect in some respects? Because when you are like bodybuilding, you do just think about everything, don't you, in terms of sleep, stress management, macros, training, cardio, steps, every single thing you think about, you plan your day around. Did you then find that transition hard because that's what you've known for years, or because it was such a, this is what I want to do now, I want to move away from this, it was actually quite a smooth transition and you just managed to fill that sort of void of time quite easily?
Yeah, it was hard in some ways, but in other ways it was very freeing, because it enabled me to spend more time with friends. It enabled me to deal with the things that I wasn't dealing with during prep. I was like, it's so strange because, like I said, there's so much that you end up neglecting when you are going through a contest prep, that being able to invest back into those areas, being able to spend time with the people that I wasn't able to spend time with, was just so wonderful. And I was so grateful for that it felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. But at the same time, having time available to feel your feelings, to feel your emotions, and to deal with shit that you've been neglecting can be quite hard in the same breath. So it was definitely a mixture of like really hard at times, but also I was so grateful for it. And I was just like, I just have this love for life now that I didn't have at the time, like because I was so wrapped up in bodybuilding. You really lose a lot of life, in my opinion, unless bodybuilding is your world and it's all you care about. You lose a lot of life when you're bodybuilding. So it's like, I'm just so grateful for the things that I have now, and I would never give those things up again to prep, if that makes sense. Because they're just so amazing. Like there are so many parts of life that I wasn't able to fully embrace and fully enjoy at the time, because bodybuilding was my priority, and that's okay. Like I loved that at the time, but where I'm at in my life now and who I am now and what I value, I would not want to give those aspects of life up to go through a prep again.
Totally get that. So I know it's one of those questions because everyone else says everything happens for a reason. If you didn't have the experiences that you've had, you wouldn't be where you are today. Yeah. If let's just say you could be exactly where you are today, regardless to what happened in the past, would you still have done bodybuilding in the past, knowing what you know now?
It's such a hard one to answer because I wouldn't have that same, like, I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I have learned if I hadn't gone through bodybuilding. And so, and I'm not one of those people that likes to regret things.
Yeah.
I think that like everything serves its purpose, and your experiences in life make you who you are. So I would not be who I am right now if I hadn't gone through what I have gone through. If I hadn't gone through those years bodybuilding, I would not be the person that I am now. I wouldn't be able to help girls move into life after bodybuilding the same way that I can now, because I wouldn't be able to empathize in the same way. I wouldn't have that experience of going through that transition myself. So no, I wouldn't take it back, because it enables me to help people more. It enables me to be the person that I am. It enables me to have learned the lessons that I've learned. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't take it back.
Great answer. So with obviously you then making this decision, did you find it hard to speak about, because you've got quite a decent presence on social media, and as a bikini athlete, people, you know, did look up to you and admire you, and obviously you did put a lot out there. You put a lot on socials, you put a lot on your podcast and YouTube and Instagram. So when you were sort of making this decision, was there that anxiety in the back of your mind of how are people going to receive this? Because I've kind of created this identity of, I'm Danni, I am a bikini athlete, I coach bikini athletes, I'm very much immersed into the world of bodybuilding, and I'm now stepping away from this? Or did you not really care because you knew that this is who I am, this is what I want to do, and people are going to have an opinion regardless?
Yeah. So at first, I didn't talk about it like straight away. I gave myself the time to make sure that it was the right decision for me. And I gave myself the time to become really sure of myself and sure that it was the right decision. And so by the time I spoke about it, I was confident enough to speak about it openly and not feel so anxious about it. Whereas if I had gone and made this decision and spoken about it straight away, I would have probably felt really anxious about it. But because I gave myself that time to myself without going on social media and being like, oh, I'm not competing anymore, because I gave myself that time, it enabled me to talk about it quite openly and not feel anxious about it, because I knew it was the right decision for me. But like I said, I think it would have been a different story if I had just come out straight away and been like, I'm not competing. And also I then gave myself another year to make a decision on what to do with my clients and my business. So it definitely took time, and it wasn't like an overnight thing. And I don't think I actually said that I definitely wasn't going to compete again for quite a few months. So I definitely gave myself that time to become like really confident in myself, and that gave me the ability to talk about it quite confidently and quite openly. So that was really important. But I mean, there was definitely an element of like, yeah, there's going to be some people that aren't a massive fan of my decision. There were people messaging me saying like, why would you make that decision? You had a chance of getting a pro card, for example. So there was definitely people who had opinions on my decision, but at the end of the day, you've got to do what's right for you. You can't live your life based on what other people might think. And for example, someone messaged me saying, why would you do that? Like, you could have been close to getting a pro card. And what am I going to do with that pro card? If the process doesn't make me happy, so what? Like, there's literally no benefit to that. Absolutely. So you've just got to make your decisions for yourself and have the confidence to make your own decisions, and to be open about talking about them, and to be open to letting your path change. You know, we as humans aren't supposed to stay the same. And just because a certain goal or a certain sport or a way of life has served you well in the past doesn't mean it's going to serve you well for the rest of your life. And I think people get very stuck in doing what they're doing and get so afraid of change and so afraid of what other people might think, that they end up living lives that actually make them quite miserable and don't leave them feeling happy and fulfilled. Whereas if they were to lean into the fact that we're supposed to change, we're supposed to evolve, and it's okay for your goals to change. And even if you went down a different path, and that didn't work out, you can always revert back to what you once did. Nothing is ever permanent. Everything is always temporary. And so remembering that can really put you at ease when it comes to making these decisions and talking about them as well.
Yeah, 100%. So you said you got a little bit of negativity, which is, I think, you're going to happen with anything that is like quite controversial. But what was the consensus like generally when you sort of made these announcements that I'm not going to be doing competitors, I'm not going to be competing myself? Because obviously it's led on to something new for yourself, which you can talk about as well. So would you say that generally it was quite positive and you actually helped people from being open about it? Or was it just people not that they didn't care, but people kind of just gave you the thumbs up and then got on with their lives, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of people said that it was quite refreshing to see someone actually have the balls to take a step back from it when they were actually doing quite well. And a lot of people, just appreciated me being open about it because, for example, there was competitors that were having the same thoughts and feelings behind closed doors, and it gave them the confidence to make their own decisions and to take a step back from competing because they didn't have the confidence previously, and it just helped to see someone else do that and be open about it. So there were people messaging me in those circumstances, and clearly that had a positive impact for them, and that's really, really nice. And that's one of the reasons I did talk about it, because I want to encourage other people to make their own decisions and to own that and know that it's okay for your path to change. So yeah, a lot of people said it was quite refreshing, and I've now got some friendships that I don't think I would have if I was still competing. And those friendships are the best friendships I've ever had in my entire life. So those people, we wouldn't be so close if I was still competing, because I would have still only been friends with bodybuilders and just been dedicating my entire life to competing. So yeah, a lot of positives have come from me being open about it and from me immersing myself in different environments and different activities. So yeah, there was definitely some positive feedback, and a lot of clients as well, like my clients who don't compete, have said how refreshing it's been because they can relate to me a little bit more. And they like that I now promote health and I promote a more holistic approach to training and nutrition rather than pushing the extremes. And I am genuinely practicing what I preach now, whereas in the past I was coaching both competitors and non-competitors. And so to the non-competitors, I wasn't practicing what I preach because I wasn't healthy when I was competing and I was pushing myself to an extreme. And so it's nice for them now to see me actually practicing what I preach, because I don't coach competitors, so I don't need to compete. And I am genuinely practicing what I promote to my non-competitors in terms of being healthy, thriving, having energy, being able to perform well, having a regular menstrual cycle, having a sex drive, having a social life. I'm actually practicing those things now. So huge positives have come with that.
Yeah, brilliant. So in terms of yourself now, what does life look like after bodybuilding, like a day in the life? Because obviously with bodybuilding, everything's regimented because it has to be, and that's the way you live your life. Food's regimented, even though you did take on track periods, to the most part it will be very, very regimented. Structuring your macros around the bodybuilding style of prioritizing protein, getting in your sessions meticulously, this day I do this day I do that, cardio and what have you. What do days look like now? Are you quite flexible with your training? Are you still quite regimented? Food wise, do you have any sort of structure? What does sort of typical days look like now? Or is there not really a typical, because that's the way you want to be right now and just be a bit more relaxed with the world?
Yeah. So although I have a lot more flexibility when it comes to training and nutrition, I am still very regimented with work. That is still very structured, and my days mostly revolve around work. So that is my main priority. But from a training perspective, I still train very frequently. And when I do train, I train very hard because, like I said, I've always loved training and I've always loved training hard. It's always remained a constant for me. And so as a bare minimum over the week, I will get I'll get 4 resistance training sessions in as a bare minimum. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 6, but usually it's between, I'd say, 4 and 5. And sometimes one of those sessions is more of like a strength and conditioning style session or a WOD. But at least for like standard hypertrophy resistance sessions. And then sometimes I'll do things like pole dancing, sometimes I'll do things like running. I just have so much more diversity in my life, and it's so much fun to have that. It's so good. And because when you're learning a new form of activity, when you're learning a new skill, it's so immersive because you have to concentrate fully. You can't go on your phone in your rest periods. You can't switch off. You can't be thinking about work. You can't be thinking about something else going on in your life. It's so immersive because you're learning something brand new, what you're not very good at. And things like have any rest to think about anything else anyway. And like pole dancing, for example, you're in a class full of women and you're learning new skills. There's no time to think about other things. And because it's so immersive, it provides an opportunity to switch off so much more than like your standard resistance training does when you've been doing that for years. Because we all know that, there's a temptation to think about other things in your rest periods or pick up your work phone and reply to some clients. It's not as immersive. So stepping away from bodybuilding has allowed me to participate in these new activities that are so immersive and provide an opportunity that I didn't have before to fully switch off and to stimulate my brain in new ways and to stimulate my body in new ways. And that's amazing. And it's something I'm so grateful for. So yeah, I do a baseline of like 4 resistance training sessions, sometimes do like running, sometimes do some pole dancing, and all of that has been so fun. And in terms of nutrition, I don't track my food anymore still. So I just, I don't track my food. But if someone was to look at my diet, they would probably say that it looks typically like someone who probably tracks their macros. Mm-hmm. I don't eat highly processed foods all day. I eat a lot of whole foods. I still have protein with each meal because I still care about my body composition and I still care about my performance. I eat really mindfully. I give myself permission to leave food on my plate if I'm full. And yeah, it's just, I have a balance, but it's not like I'm going out drinking every weekend or I go out for meals every night, because that's not the case. It's not the way that I would want to live my life. I care about my health and I care about my body composition. So I want to keep those things in a good place.
Amazing. So with bodybuilding, when you are in the world of bodybuilding, it is kind of this like cycle, isn't it, of you off season to improve, you then prep, and then it's like setting future goals, right? This is what I've done, this is what I want to improve on. So stepping away from that, have you kind of set yourself sort of goals for the future outside of that with work, any sort of personal endeavors within the other things that you're doing? Or have you kind of stepped away from being sort of goal, because it is very sort of goal driven, isn't it? Bodybuilding, it's always that one step further. What can I do to improve? Has that just manifested in business, or is it, actually, do you know what? I'm going to take that pressure off myself a bit more, go with the flow with life and just be a bit more relaxed and just take that stress off myself?
Yeah, I definitely have business related goals. Obviously, my decision to stop coaching competitors meant that I dropped quite a few clients and I lost a chunk of income. However, that decision was so worth it because it was so needed for my health and my ability to be the best coach I possibly can be, as opposed to trying to coach in a way that wasn't in line with what I value.
Yeah.
So that decision was so necessary, but it meant an initial drop in income. And so my goal from a business perspective is to be able to help more people and get back to helping as many people as what I was previously. which will obviously result in an improvement in my finances, but that is not the main motivation. I just want to be the best coach that I possibly can and help as many people as I possibly can in the best way. So that's, I suppose, my goal from a business perspective. But personally, I think initially I have jumped into a couple of local CrossFit competitions, but they've not been individual competitions, they've been group competitions. So you would compete as like a team of 3 or a team of 4. So they've been more for fun than like, they've not been about me, they've been about like the team and having a good time and just doing the best I possibly can. But I've really tried to question the need to set goals constantly, because I think when people do that, they're often trying to mask something else. Like there's some, they might feel inadequate in some area of life, whatever that might be, and they're trying to almost seek gratification and make themselves feel adequate and give themselves almost a false sense of progression by setting like body composition related goals or performance related goals. Don't get me wrong, I have nothing wrong with people setting body composition or performance related goals. I think they're great, as long as you don't feel reliant upon them to feel like a complete person. You shouldn't feel reliant upon having like a fat loss goal or having a goal of stepping on stage or having a goal of running a marathon to make you feel complete. It's okay to set them as long as you already feel complete before you set that goal. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. It's got to add to your life. It shouldn't be like become all consuming and take over, basically.
Exactly. And if that goal, so you've got to ask, like, if that goal was taken away from you, would you feel like you completely lost yourself as a person? If the answer to that is yes, then it's probably an indication that you need to take some time away from setting yourself a goal constantly and get comfortable and confident with who you are outside of that. So I've consciously tried to make sure that I've spent periods without a goal, if that makes sense, to make sure that I'm not reliant upon those things to make me feel complete, because I know who I am without an external goal. So yeah, I don't really have any goals right now. I'm just quite happy with where I'm at. And you mentioned like when you are bodybuilding, you go through obviously your improvement seasons and then preps. I now really enjoy just maintaining a body composition that I'm actually happy with year round, as opposed to going through these cycles of like quote unquote bulking and cutting. And it's really, really nice to be able to just sit at maintenance and not see these fluctuations in your energy levels, in your mood, in your sex drive, in your hunger, in your sleep, in your body fat and how comfortable you feel in your clothes. My goal now, and I think the goal for the majority of the population should be to get to a point where they're happy in their own skin within a certain range and can actually maintain that year round. And that would be the healthiest place for a lot of people to sit as well, because fat loss doesn't come without its potential risks. And, you know, even just down to simply the fact that you're in an energy deficit, you're so much more likely to be deficient in certain nutrients. So if you can actually just achieve your goal of a body composition that you're happy in and then set maintenance and have enough energy coming in to support your requirements, that is a much healthier way to go about like health and fitness, as opposed to going through extreme fat loss phases followed by extreme surpluses.
Absolutely.
Or off seasons.
Yeah, for sure. So just to kind of wrap this up now, a lot of people who are listening to this, who are listeners of the podcast, aren't bodybuilders at all. They're not in the scene of bodybuilding. Now, there will be people who've listened to this because they've, you know, come off your page or my page, you are bodybuilders and think this is quite an interesting topic. But there will also be people listening to this who are just interested in your story, interested in having a bit of a listen. So the final question that I want to ask is about advice, but I want this to be kind of holistic, because there's going to be people who listen to this who potentially aren't, you know, bodybuilders and they don't want to give up bodybuilding, but perhaps they're actually doing something in their life, like a job or maybe a style of training where they feel that they've got involved in it and that's what they should be doing, but that doesn't actually serve them. And we know that change is hard, and that actually making that decision to go, do you know what, this doesn't fulfill me anymore. This is not who I want to be. This is not what I want to do, especially if it is a big element of your life, like your job. When you bodybuild, it's your identity. 3 top tips for how you actually make that transition and make that decision, because changing your identity is hard. I had to kind of do it a little bit last year when I was trying to regain my menstrual cycle, and that detachment was freaking hard. So from your own personal experience, I'm guessing because you helped competitors to step away from it as well, what 3 bits of advice would you give to someone who right now is umming and ahhing whether something is right for them, and how they make that step away, or how they make that decision to step away and know that it's the right thing?
Yeah. First of all, so 3 things. First thing would be to take a step back from external pressures. So that might include social media. It might include maybe some people in your immediate real life potentially, but take a step back from all of the things that often heavily influences to make our decisions. So for example, if you're on social media and you're constantly surrounded by people that compete, but you think that competing might not be right for you anymore, if you only surround yourself on social media with people that do step on stage and do compete, their definition of success is going to be winning a show, competing, getting your pro card. That is probably going to influence what your definition of success is as well, if you're constantly exposing yourself to that. So if you can just, put down your phone, put down social media for a period of time and really go internal and think about defining your own measures of success, that will really help you in terms of deciding what route to go down moving forwards and what is right for you personally, as opposed to what might be right for somebody else or what is the most popular thing at the moment. So that's the first thing, like just block out distractions essentially. The second thing is get confident on who you are and what your values are in life. So have a bit of a journal, a reflection, and think about your top 5 or top 10 values in life and number them 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. You can then use those values as like your moral compass and your guide when it comes to setting your goals. Because if you're setting goals that compromise your ability to act in line with those values, that is a sign that those goals are the wrong goals for you. You want to set goals that allow you to live life in line with your values, whatever they might be. And just because my values might be one thing, that doesn't mean that your values should be as well. Everyone is completely different and there's no right or wrong. But if you want to do this exercise and you're stuck on where to start, you can literally type in the internet like list of values, and it will give you a list of like hundreds of values, and you can just have a scroll, and any that like immediately jump out at you, write them down, and that can be a good starting point. And then you can start to order them and eliminate some maybe, and narrow it down to your top 5 or top 10 to get confident in what your values are in life. Number 3 would be to kind of ties into number 1, but stop concerning yourself with what other people might think of your decisions, because like it's just a waste living you're never going to be happy and you're never going to feel fulfilled if you're always living your life based on what other people might think, whether that be in person or on social media, whether it be friends, whether it be family. Whatever your decision is, whether it's changing your job or changing your path when it comes to health and fitness, you've got to make it for yourself and stop worrying about what everyone else might think.
I love that. That's brilliant. And the thing is, that's not just competitors, that advice is absolutely brilliant for so many different walks of life. So that's really, really valuable. So I'm sure everyone can take something from that, whether you do the whole bodybuilding shebang or not. But I just want to say thank you for that and for sharing your story so openly and sharing your journey so openly. So you're doing a lot on socials at the moment to, you know, really, really share this, you know, helping people transition away. So in terms of sort of social media and the things that you're doing at the moment, where can people find you? Where can people who potentially have listened to this and thought, you know what, this hits home? I really want to get some more information or support on this. So where can they find you? What do you offer in terms of support, in terms of coaching? Obviously that little Facebook group that you've got going on as well.
Yeah, so my main Instagram is just Danni Bosworth. It's DANNI BOSWORTH. So give me a follow on there, and please don't hesitate to message me. I'm always happy to help however I possibly can, and I don't mind anyone messaging me if you have any questions off the back of this, or if you just want to chat. And myself and Charlie, my friend who has been through a very similar journey to me and is also a coach herself, have set up a Facebook page called The Flourishing Competitor. You can access that through my Instagram. So if you just head to my Instagram, all of the links are on there. But in the link in my bio, there's a link to the Facebook page. It's completely free. And it's open to anyone, whether you compete at the moment or whether you don't, whether you're a coach or whether you're a client, whoever you are, it's open to you, and you'll learn a lot by joining. It's basically a group where we're posting informative content on what goes on and some of the struggles that people might have when they're transitioning into life after bodybuilding. But it's also appropriate for if you're transitioning to life after having a fat loss goal or pursuing a photo shoot prep, whatever it might be, it's probably appropriate for you. We're doing lectures on topics like your relationship with food, body image, and all of the other struggles that can come with this transition, such as loss of identity. So join us over there, have a look at some of the content, and if you have any questions for future Q&As, you can just drop them in a post on there as well. But it would be lovely to have you. And I have my own podcast as well called the Female Fitness Podcast, where there's a lot of episodes on there because it's been going years now. So yeah, you're welcome to listen if you want to.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Danni. It's been really, really, really appreciated. So yeah, please do go check her out, guys, if you don't, on socials. I'll leave it all in the notes as well, and the YouTube bit at the bottom, so that people can just give it one click. So please do go check her out. I am in the Facebook group. I won't lie, I've not been the best in it, but I've had a good scroll, and there's a hell of a lot of good content in there for free, guys. So you've got absolutely nothing to lose by joining. You really, really don't. But once again, thank you so much for your time, Danni. It's appreciated. Thank you everyone who has listened to this week's episode, and I'll catch you on next week's episode.